Here's something that will genuinely rewire how you hear the world. Americans never actually lost the British accent at all. The British invented a shiny new one, and the rest of us kept the older sound. Get this, walk through London 3 centuries ago, and almost everyone there would sound closer to a modern New Yorker than a modern Londoner. That crisp, posh English voice you know from every single period drama, it is younger than the United States of America itself. Yes, really, that fancy accent is a surprisingly modern invention. So who actually changed and who quietly stayed exactly the same? Picture the very same word landing softly in London but sharply in Boston. Two proud nations, one shared language, slowly pulling in opposite directions. It sounds impossible, yet the evidence is hiding in plain sight. By the end of this, you'll never hear these accents the same way. This is one of history's greatest and most delightful accidental plot twists. Stick with me, because the real answer flips the whole story upside down. In the early 1600s, English settlers crossed the wild Atlantic on small wooden ships. They carried tools, seeds, and Bibles across the water. They also carried something completely invisible, the exact way that they spoke. Honestly, back then there was no single British accent to even leave behind. England was a loud patchwork of regional voices. A dock worker from London sounded nothing like a shepherd from Yorkshire. But most of these particular colonists spoke in a way linguists now call rhotic. It simply means they pronounce the letter R hard and clear. They rolled it firmly at the ends of their words, just like most Americans still do. Once that rugged sound crossed the ocean, it got locked inside a brand new world. Imagine a single village voice sailing off and surviving untouched for centuries. The colonists were plain farmers, not fashion followers chasing London trends. They had a whole wilderness to tame and no time for fancy vowels. So their rugged old English simply kept living mile after mile inland. Every rolling R they packed became a tiny time capsule of English. 3,000 miles of cold water kept it frozen in place for generations. Meanwhile, back in England, a quiet little rebellion was brewing inside people's mouths. Fashionable Londoners slowly began dropping the R sound from the ends of their words. They started letting the final R in a word like car quietly disappear. The accent we now call deeply British was really a trendy fad. Dropping your R's quickly became a badge of the refined and wealthy. It signaled that you had money, leisure, and an expensive education. And here's the thing, America simply never got that particular memo. Separated by a whole ocean, the colonists kept rolling their honest R's. To them, the new London fashion felt distant and a little silly. This little fashion started among the very richest families in the capital. From there, it trickled slowly outward like an expensive new perfume. Ordinary Londoners copied the elite, hoping some polish might rub off. Meanwhile, America kept its distance and kept its sturdy, stubborn R. The fashionable dropped it, the practical frontier simply never bothered to. So, the two branches of English drifted further apart with every passing decade. Here's a thought that breaks a lot of brains. Shakespeare himself probably sounded a little bit American. Scholars reconstruct old pronunciations from spelling, from jokes, and from rhyme. Words that clash in modern England often rhymed perfectly back then. And here's where it gets really interesting. That rhyme still works today. The words prove and love once fit together neatly. So the American voice is basically a living museum of older English. Every time you speak, you carry a little piece of the past. Old poems only rhyme correctly when you read them the older way. Read them in a modern British accent, and the music quietly breaks. Read them like an American, and the rhymes snap perfectly together. Somehow, the deep past is still living quietly inside a Texan hello. In a real sense, American English is the closest thing to a recording. The people who claim to keep English pure had wandered furthest from its roots. So how did that famous posh accent actually get invented? In the 17 and 1800s, Britain's upper classes wanted to sound unmistakably elite. They polished a smooth, R-dropping accent for themselves. Eventually, it earned a grand name, received pronunciation. Actually, it spread through elite boarding schools like a secret password. If you spoke it, doors quietly opened for you. Radio announcers later adopted it as their official style. Suddenly, this invented voice became the official sound of Britain. Special tutors were hired to drill every rounded vowel to perfection. Getting it wrong could quietly cost you friends, jobs, and marriages. The accent became a locked gate around Britain's highest social circles. America, by contrast, let almost anyone talk their way steadily upward. A single vowel could quietly announce exactly which school had shaped you. It felt ancient and timeless, yet it was newer than the steamboat. Here's what's fascinating. Your accent has always been a secret badge. It quietly broadcasts your background to everyone around you. The moment you open your mouth, strangers instantly start guessing. In Britain, coaches sold the promise of climbing the ladder. You could change your class simply by changing your vowels. America built its own status ladder, but tangled it up with money. A factory owner and a farmer could share the same rugged voice. What mattered here was your bank balance, not your birth. The very same sound meant poverty in London and success in New York. Think of your voice as a passport stamped by your whole life. Strangers read that passport instantly, before you even finish a sentence. In Britain, that judgment could lift you up or shut you out. In America, the rules were messier, looser, and far more forgiving. That is why people still judge, admire, and imitate certain voices today. It is the same exact voice pointing toward two totally different destinies. But America was never going to keep just one tidy accent. Wave after wave of newcomers kept arriving on its shores. Each one brought a whole new music of speech. Irish, German, Italian, and West African voices poured into the mix. You know, that mixing is why a Bostonian sounds nothing like a Texan. One clips his words fast, the other lets them stretch. Each region simmered its own flavor of English. They seasoned it with slang, rhythm, and melody. Out of that glorious chaos, dozens of rich accents were born. Every neighborhood added its own spice to the simmering pot of speech. Sailors, farmers, and factory workers all left fingerprints on the language. New words were invented daily, and old ones were happily reshaped. The whole country became one giant, noisy laboratory of living English. No committee planned it. The accents grew wild and gloriously on their own. And every one of them is a genuine piece of American history. Take that slow, warm Southern drawl the whole world adores. It stretches vowels out like warm golden taffy. Even short sentences slowly melt into unhurried, gentle little melodies. That drawl grew from English, Scots, Irish, and African speech. Seriously, an accent is living history you can actually hear. Every rounded vowel is a fingerprint of migration. Every dropped consonant carries centuries of quiet stories. So when you mock an accent, you mock a long journey. Listen closely and you can hear whole centuries inside a single hello. The drawl even preserves sounds that England itself quietly abandoned. It is not lazy or wrong, it is beautifully, richly historical. Every American accent is a treasure map of where people came from. Behind that easy drawl sits a deep, tangled family tree of voices. Behind every voice is a story worth respecting. Then came the 20th century and a brand new force. It began quietly reshaping the very way that everyone spoke. Early Hollywood invented its own strange half-British accent. It sounded fancy, but nobody really talked that way. Announcers and film stars nudged millions toward one shared sound. Get this, mass media flattens wild accents faster than any king could. Suddenly, a farmer and a banker could sound almost the same. Yet accents are stubborn, living, and quietly defiant things. Right now, young Californians and Texans are bending their vowels into fresh shapes. Radio and film reached into millions of living rooms every single night. People slowly, unconsciously copied the polished voices they heard on air. Sharp local accents began softening toward one smoother national sound. But people are far too stubborn to ever sound completely identical. And tomorrow's slang will sound just as strange to us as ours does. The great accent story is still being written today. So let's finally settle this whole delicious mystery. Americans held on to the older, rougher English of the settlers. They kept the hard R and the open, honest vowels. The British drifted toward a smoother, fashionable voice invented much later. Honestly, both accents changed, but the posh one changed far more. So next time somebody says Americans ruined English, you'll know better. You are not the ones who wandered off at all. If anything, you stayed remarkably, stubbornly loyal to the original. So keep talking exactly the way that you already do. So the smug old stereotype has actually had it backwards this whole time. The so-called proper accent is really the one that wandered off. Your everyday voice is a genuine living link to the deep past. So wear your accent proudly because it carries a remarkable story. You simply held the line while the fashion drifted somewhere far away. And subscribe if this little history just rewired your brain today.